Hi.
Hello, welcome to Mystery Story. We are going to be reading a story. Something new. And first we're going to be reading the Bible book.
So, if you have any friends that like to listen to stories, this would be actually a really good time to start because we are at the very beginning of the book of Judges. We started it yesterday, and I have a big reveal. This book right here.
What is it?
We will reveal that after we read our Bible time. There's nobody on, so I can't reveal it when there's nobody on. You see what I'm saying? All right, so I think Kimberly has some pictures to show us. Here she is.
This one I just finished, and this one I did a while back.
Okay, so I don't see anybody on, but I'm trying to, there we go, open this up to the book of Judges. All right, so here we are, Israel's disobedience. This is Judges chapter 2. Mom yesterday hit the nail on the head when she asked about all these places that Israel didn't quite defeat when they invaded the land of Canaan. So all these cities and villages and the villages around the villages, whatever it was that it said here, didn't get completely conquered. And now we go to chapter 2 and we find out the results that happened as a result of not being conquered the rest of the land. So now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give to your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. When when Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land, and the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the people who were around them and bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the hands of their surrounding enemies. so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of his enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, because this people have transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers and have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel by them, whether they will take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their fathers did or not. So the Lord left those nations, not driving them out quickly, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. And that is the end of chapter 2 of the book of Judges. So, since there are two people on, I just want to mention that, like I said, this is an excellent time to start the adventure. We are starting a new book today, and I think you're going to like it. And so, if you have friends, then please advertise the page. We just started Judges, and I posted two videos that I watched last night, and they're very excellent videos that that kind of go over the book of Judges. And apparently, in the Hebrew Bible, Judges and Ruth are linked together, and that is an interesting parallel because Ruth is a different kind of story than the rest of Judges, which is probably why it was separated in other languages. Anyway, so I have one person. Is that Mom? So there's two people, but it only says one on here. Anyway, do I have any comments? Let's see, no comments. All right, we were a chatty bunch yesterday, but that's okay. All right. Who's ready for the big reveal? Hi, Kimmy. Okay, Kim says hi, Daddy. Okay, so here's the book that we're going to be reading, and it's a really good one. This really is one of my favorite books. Nice unicorn, Kimmy. This really is one of my favorite books, and I hope you like it too. It's called. There's been one really good movie and one not so good. Yeah, the movie isn't nearly as good as the book. Ben-Hur. One of my favorites. All right, so it is quite a long book, but this edition of it, which is a Reader's Digest edition, has some really beautiful artwork in it. Here's that looks like a familiar picture. So we are coming in the Advent season, and I thought this was an appropriate time to begin a book that begins in the Advent season. So it is only the beginning of it. So this is book 1, The flashes come and go, all heaven bursts her starry floors, and strews her light below, and deepens on and up. Alfred Lord Tennyson. That is a poem beginning, and this is Into the Desert. Is that the name of the chapter or the book? It's been a while since I've read this, so I have to kind of, yeah, okay, so this is book 1, chapter 1, Into the Desert. This is Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace. Chapter 1, Into the Desert. The Jebel es Zubla is a mountain 50 miles and more in length, and so narrow that its tracery on the map gives it a likeness to a caterpillar crawling from the south to the north. Standing on its red and white cliffs and looking off under the path of the rising sun, one sees only the desert of Arabia, where the east winds, so hateful to the vine growers of Jericho, have kept their playground since the beginning. Its feet are well covered by sands tossed from the Euphrates, there to lie, for the mountain is a wall to the pasture lands of Moab and Ammon on the west, lands which else had been of the desert a part. The Arab has impressed his language upon everything south and east of Judea. So in his tongue, the old Jebel is the parent of numberless wadis, which intersecting the Roman road, now a dim suggestion of what once it was, a dusty path for Syrian pilgrims to and from Mecca, run their furrows, deepening as they go to pass the torrents of the rainy season into the Jordan, or the last receptacle, the Dead Sea. Out of one of these wadis, or more particularly out of that one which rises at the extreme end of the Jebel, and extending east of north, becomes at length the bed of the Jabbok River. A traveler passed going to the tablelands of the desert. To this person, the attention of the reader is first besought. Judged by his appearance, he was quite 45 years old, not like me. His beard, once of the deepest black, flowing broadly over his breast, was streaked with white, also about like me. His face was brown as a parched coffee berry, and so hidden by a red kufiya, as the kerchief of the head is at this day called by the children of the desert, as to be but in part visible. Now and then he raised his eyes, and they were large and dark. He was clad in the flowing garments so universal in the East that their style may not be described more particularly, for he sat under a miniature tent and rode a great white dromedary. What's a dromedary? Somebody tell me. JJ? A dromedary is a camel. So here's a picture, just in case you're wondering. Except there's only one of them, okay? At this point. All right. It may be doubted if the people of the West ever overcome the impression made upon them by the first view of a camel equipped and loaded for the desert. Custom so fatal to other novelties affects this feeling but little. At the end of long journeys with caravans, after years of residence with the Bedouin, the Western born, wherever they may be, will stop and wait the passing of the stately brute. The charm is not in the figure, which not even love can make beautiful, nor in the movement, the noiseless stepping or the broad careen, as is the kindness of the sea to a ship, so is that of the desert to its creature. It clothes him with all its mysteries, in such manner too that While we are looking at him, we are thinking of them. Therein is the wonder. The animal which now came out of the wadi might well have claimed the customary homage. Its color and height, its breadth of foot, its bulk of body, not fat, but overlaid with muscle, its long, slender neck of swan-like curvature, the head wide between the eyes and tapering to a muzzle which a lady's bracelet might have almost clasped. Its motion, step long and elastic, tread sure and soundless, all certified its Syrian blood, old as the days of Cyrus, and absolutely priceless. There was the usual bridle, covering the forehead with scarlet fringe, and garnishing the throat with pendant brazen chains, each ending with a tinkling silver bell, but to the bridle there was neither rein for the rider nor strap for a driver. The furniture perched on the back was an invention with which any other person than of the East would have made the inventor renowned. It consisted of two wooden boxes, scarce 4 feet in length, balanced so that one hung at each side. The inner space, softly lined and carpeted, was arranged to allow the master to sit or lie half reclined. Over it all was stretched a green awning. Broad back and breast straps and girth, secured with countless knots and ties, held the device in place. In such manner the ingenious sons of Cush had contrived to make comfortable the sunburned ways of the wilderness, along which lay their duty as often as their pleasure. When the dromedary lifted itself out of the last break of the wadi, the traveller had passed the boundary of El Belka, the ancient Ammon. It was morning time. Before him was the sun, half curtained in fleecy mist. Before him also spread the desert, not the realm of drifting sand which was farther on, but the region where the herbage began to dwarf, where the surface is strewn with boulders of granite and grey and brown stones interspersed with languishing acacias and tufts of camel grass. The oak, bramble, and arbutus lay behind, as if they had come to a line, looked over into the well-less waste, and crouched with fear. And now there was an end of path or road. More than ever the camel seemed insensibly driven. It lengthened and quickened its pace, its head pointed straight toward the horizon. Through the wide nostrils it drank the wind in great draughts. The litter swayed and rose and fell like a boat in the waves. Dried leaves in occasional beds rustled underfoot. Sometimes a perfume like absinthe sweetened all the air. Lark and chat and rock swallow leapt to wing, and white partridges ran whistling and clucking out of the way. More rarely a fox or a hyena quickened its gallop to study the intruders at a safe distance. Off to the right rose the hills of the Jebel, the pearl-grey veil resting upon them, changing momentarily into a purple which the sun would make matchless a little later. Over their highest peaks a vulture sailed on broad wings into widening circles. But of all these things the tenant under the green tent saw nothing, or at least made no sign of recognition. His eyes were fixed and dreamy. The going of the man, like that of the animal, was as one being led. For 2 hours the dromedary swung forward, keeping the trot steadily and the line due east. In that time the traveller never changed his position, nor looked to the right or the left. On the desert, distance is not measured by miles or leagues, but by the sa'at or hour, and the manzil or halt. 3.5 leagues fill the former, 15 or 25 the latter, but they are the rates for the common camel. A carrier of the genuine Syrian stock can make 3 leagues easily. At full speed he overtakes the ordinary winds. As one of the results of the rapid advance, the face of the landscape underwent a change. The Jebel stretched along the western horizon like a pale blue ribbon. A tell or hummock of clay and cemented sand arose here and there. Now and then basaltic stones lifted their round crowns, outposts of the mountain against the forces of the plain. All else, however, was sand, sometimes smooth as the beaten beach, then heaped in rolling ridges. Here chopped waves, there long swells. So, too, the condition of the atmosphere changed. The sun, high risen, had drunk his fill of dew and mist, and warmed the breeze that kissed the wanderer under the awning. Far and near he was tinting the earth with faint milk whiteness and shimmering all the sky. 2 hours more passed without rest or deviation from the course. Vegetation entirely ceased. The sand so crusted on the surface that it broke into rattling flakes at every step held undisputed sway. The Jebel was out of view, and there was no landmark visible. The shadow that before followed had now shifted to the north, and was keeping even race with the objects which cast it. And as there was no sign of halting, the conduct of the traveler became each moment more strange. No one, be it remembered, seeks the desert for a pleasure ground. Life and business traverse it by paths along which the bones of things dead are strewn as so many blazons. Such are the roads from well to well, from pasture to pasture. The heart of the most veteran sheik beats quicker when he finds himself alone in the pathless tracks. So the man with whom we are dealing could not have been in search of pleasure. Neither was his manner that of a fugitive. Not once did he look behind him. In such situations, fear and curiosity are the most common sensations. He was not moved by them. When men are lonely, they stoop to any companionship. The dog becomes a comrade, the horse a friend, and it is no shame to shower them with caresses and speeches of love. The camel received no such token, not a touch, not a word. Exactly at noon, the dromedary of its own will stopped and uttered the cry or moan peculiarly piteous by which its kind always protest against an overload and sometimes crave attention and rest. The master thereupon bestirred himself, waking, as it were, from sleep. He threw the curtains of the howdah up, looked at the sun, surveyed the country on every side, long and carefully, as if to identify an appointed place. Satisfied with the inspection, he drew a deep breath and nodded, much as to say, "At last, at last." A moment after, he crossed his hands upon his breast, bowed his head, and prayed silently. The pious duty done, he prepared to dismount. From his throat proceeded the sound heard doubtless by the favorite camels of Job, "Ich, ich," the signal to kneel. Slowly the animal obeyed, grunting the while. The rider then put his foot upon the slender neck and stepped upon the sand. Chapter 2: Meeting of the Wise Men. The man, as now revealed, was of admirable proportions, not so tall as powerful. Loosening the silken rope which held the kufiya on his head, he brushed the fringed folds back until his face was bare. A strong face, almost negro in color, yet the low, broad forehead, aquiline nose, the outer corners of the eyes turned slightly upward, the hair profuse, straight, harsh, of metallic luster, and falling to the shoulder in many plates were signs of origin impossible to disguise. So looked the Pharaohs and the later Ptolemies. So looked Mizraim, father of the Egyptian race. He wore the kamis, a white cotton shirt, tight-sleeved, open in front, extending to the ankles and embroidered down the collar and breast, over which was thrown a brown woolen cloak, now, as in all probability it was then, called the abba, an outer garment with long skirt and short sleeves lined inside with stuff of mixed cotton and silk, edged all round with a margin of clouded yellow. His feet were protected by sandals attached by thongs of soft leather. A sash held the kamis to his waist. What was very noticeable, considering he was alone and that the desert was the haunt of leopards and lions and men quite as wild, he carried no arms, not even the crooked stick used for guiding camels, wherefore we may at least infer his errand peaceful, and that he was either uncommonly bold or under extraordinary protection. The traveller's limbs were numb, for the ride had been long and wearisome, so he rubbed his hands and stamped his feet, and walked around the faithful servant whose lustrous eyes were closing in calm content with the cud he had already found. Who's the man's faithful servant? Somebody tell me? Kimmy? His camel, yes, his faithful servant, chewing the cud, which he had already found. Often, while making the circuit, he paused and, shading his eyes with his hands, examined the desert to the extremest verge of vision, and always, when the survey was ended, his face clouded with disappointment, slight, but enough to advise a shrewd spectator that he was there expecting company, if not by appointment. At the same time, the spectator would have been conscious of a sharpening of the curiosity to learn what the business could be that required transaction in a place so far from civilized abode. However disappointed, there could be little doubt of the stranger's confidence in the coming of the expected company. In token thereof, he went first to the litter, and from the cot or box opposite the one he had occupied in coming, produced a sponge and a small gurglet of water, in which he washed the eyes, face, and nostrils of the camel. That done, from the same depository he drew a circular cloth, red and white striped, a bundle of rods, and a stout cane. The latter, after some manipulation, proved to be a cunning device of lesser joints, one within another, which, when united together, formed the center pole higher than his head. When the pole was planted and the rods set around it, he spread the cloth over them and was literally at home, a home much smaller than the inhabitants of Emir and Sheik, yet their counterpart in all other respects. From the litter, again, he brought a carpet or square rug, and covered the floor of the tent on the side from the sun. That done, he went out, and once more, and with greater care and more eager eyes, swept the encircling country. Except a distant jackal galloping across the plain, and an eagle flying toward the Gulf of Aqaba, the waste below, like the blue above it, was lifeless. He turned to the camel, saying low and in a tongue strange to the desert, "We are far from home. O racer with the swiftest winds, we are far from home. But God is with us. Let us be patient." Then he took some beans from a pocket in the saddle and put them in a bag made to hang below the animal's nose. And when he saw the relish with which the good servant took to the food, he turned and again scanned the world of sand, dim with the glow of the vertical sun. "They will come," he said calmly. "He that led me is leading them. I will make ready. From the pouches which lined the interior of the cot, and from a willow basket which was part of its furniture, he brought forth materials for a meal, platters close woven with the fibers of palms, wine in small gurglets of skin, mutton dried and smoked, stoneless chamois or Syrian pomegranates, dates of El Shalabi, wondrous rich and grown in the Nakhil or palm orchards of central Arabia, cheese like David's, slices of milk, and leavened bread from the city bakery, all of which he carried and set upon the carpet under the tent. As the final preparation about the provisions, he laid 3 pieces of silk cloth used among refined people of the East to cover the knees of guests while at the table, a circumstance significant of the number of persons who were to partake of his entertainment, the number he was awaiting. All was ready now. He stepped out. Lo, in the east, a dark speck on the face of the desert. He stood as if rooted to the ground, his eyes dilated. His flesh crept chilly, as if touched by something supernatural. The speck grew, became large as a hand, at length assumed defined proportions. A little later, full into view, swung a duplication of his own dromedary, tall and white, and bearing a houdah, the traveling litter of Hindustan. Then, which is India, by the way, then the Egyptian crossed his hands upon his breast and looked to heaven. God only is great, he exclaimed, his eyes full of tears, his soul in awe. The stranger drew nigh, sorry. Then he too seemed just waking. He beheld the kneeling camel, the tent, and the man standing prayerfully at the door. He crossed his hands, bent his head, and prayed silently, after which, in a little while, he stepped from the camel's neck to the sand and advanced toward the Egyptian, as did the Egyptian toward him. A moment they looked at each other. Then they embraced, that is, each threw his right arm over the other's shoulder, and the left round the side, placing his chin first upon the left, then upon the right breast. Peace be with thee, O servant of the true God, the stranger said, and to thee, O brother of the true faith, to thee peace and welcome, the Egyptian replied with fervor. The newcomer was tall and gaunt, with lean face, sunken eyes, white hair and beard, and a complexion between the hue of cinnamon and bronze. He too was unarmed. His costume was Hindustani. Over the skull cap a shawl was wound in great folds, forming a turban. His body garments were in the style of the Egyptians, except that the abba was shorter, exposing wide flowing breeches gathered at the ankles. In place of sandals, his feet were clad in half slippers of red leather, pointed to the toes. Save the slippers, the costume from head to foot was of white linen. The air of the man was high, stately, severe. Visvamitra, the greatest of the ascetic heroes of the Iliad of the East, had in him a perfect representative. He might have been called a life drenched with the wisdom of Brahma, devotion incarnate. Only in his eyes was there proof of humanity. When he lifted his face from the Egyptian's breast, they were glistened with tears. God only is great, he exclaimed when the embrace was finished. And blessed are they that serve him, the Egyptian answered, wondering at the paraphrase of his own exclamation. But let us wait, he added. Let us wait, for see, the other comes yonder. They looked to the north, where, already plain to view, a third camel of the whiteness of the others came careening like a ship. They waited, standing together, waited until the newcomer arrived, dismounted, and advanced towards them. Peace to you, O my brother, he said while embracing the Hindu, and the Hindu answered, God's will be done. The last comer was all unlike his friends. His frame was slighter, his complexion white. A mass of waving light hair was a perfect crown for his small but beautiful head. The warmth of his dark blue eyes certified a delicate mind and a cordial, brave nature. He was bareheaded and unarmed. Under the folds of the Tyrian blanket which he wore with unconscious grace appeared a tunic, short-sleeved and low-necked, gathered to the waist by a band and reaching nearly to the knee, leaving the neck, arms, and legs bare. Sandals guarded his feet. 50 years, probably more, had spent themselves upon him, with no other effect apparently than to tinge his demeanor with gravity and temper his words with forethought. The physical organization and the brightness of soul were untouched. No need to tell the student from what kindred he was sprung. If he came not himself from the groves of Athena, his ancestry did. When his arms fell from the Egyptian, the latter said with a tremulous voice, "The Spirit brought me first, wherefore I know myself chosen to be the servant of my brethren. The tent is set, and the bread is ready for the breaking. Let me perform my office." Taking each by the hand, he led them within, and removed their sandals, and washed their feet, and he poured water upon their hands, and dried them with napkins. Then, when he had laved his own hands, that's washed his own hands, he said, "Let us take care of ourselves, brethren, as our service requires, and eat that we may be strong for what remains of the day's duty. While we eat, we will each learn who the others are, and whence they come, and how they are called." He took them to the repast, and seated them so that they faced each other. Simultaneously, their heads bent forward, their hands crossed upon their breasts, and speaking together, they said aloud this simple grace: "Father of all, God, what we have here is of thee. Take our thanks and bless us, that we may continue to do thy will." With the last word, they raised their eyes and looked at each other in wonder. Each had spoken in a language never before heard by the others, yet each understood perfectly what was said. Their souls thrilled with divine emotion, for by the miracle they recognized the divine presence. That's the end of chapter 2. I will read chapter 3, but I want to get a drink of water first. All right. So we have 3 men and 3 camels. One of the men is from Egypt, one of the men is from India, and the other one is from Greece. And chapter 3 is called "The Athenian Speaks." Is JJ asleep? Faith. So this book might put JJ to sleep. It's a lot of words, but it's really good. So we're going to read this one speech, and then we'll read the other 2 speeches from the Indian and finally from the Egyptian tomorrow. But I do want to start with this one today, because my goal is to try to finish this before New Year's. Don't know if that's possible, but we'll see. All right. Chapter 3. To speak in the style of the period, the meeting just described took place in the year of Rome 747, just like an airplane, although when this book was written, airplanes were not invented. The month was December, and winter reigned over all the region east of the Mediterranean. Such as ride upon the desert in this season go not far until smitten with a keen appetite. The company under the little tent were not exceptions to the rule. They were hungry and ate heartily, and after the wine they talked. To the wayfarer in a strange land, nothing is so sweet as to hear his name on the tongue of a friend, said the Egyptian, who assumed to be the president of the repast. But, excuse me. Before us lie many days of companionship. It is time we knew each other. So, if it be agreeable, he who came last shall be first to speak. Then slowly at first, like one watchful of himself, the Greek began. What I have to tell, my brethren, is so strange that I hardly know where to begin, or what I may with propriety speak. I do not yet understand myself. The most I am sure of is that I am doing a master's will, and that the service is a constant ecstasy. When I think of the purpose I am sent to fulfill, there is in me a joy so inexpressible that I know the will is God's. The good man paused, unable to proceed, while the others, in sympathy with his feelings, dropped their gaze. Far to the west of this, he began, there is a land which may never be forgotten, if only because the world is too much its debtor, and because the indebtedness is for things that bring to men their purest pleasures. I will say nothing of the arts, nothing of philosophy, of eloquence, of poetry, of war. Oh, my brethren, hers is the glory which must shine forever in perfected letters, by which he we go to find and proclaim will be made known to all the earth. The land I speak of is Greece. I am Gaspar, son of Clynthes the Athenian. My people, he continued, were given wholly to study, and from them I derived the same passion. It happens that two of our philosophers, the very greatest of the many, teach one of the doctrine of a soul in every man and its immortality, the other the doctrine of one God, infinitely just. Those, by the way, are Aristotle and Plato, just in case you're wondering. From the multitude of subjects about which the schools were disputing, I separated them as alone worth the labor for solution, for I thought there was a relation between God and the soul as yet unknown. On this theme the mind can reason to a point, a dead, impassable wall. Arrived there, all that remains is to stand and cry aloud for help. So I did. All that uh, But no voice came to me over the wall. In despair I tore myself from the cities and the schools. At these words a grave smile of approval lighted the gaunt face of the Hindu. In the northern part of my country, in Thessaly, the Greek proceeded to say, there is a mountain famous as the home of the gods, where Theos, whom my countrymen believe supreme, has his abode. Olympus is its name. Thither I betook myself. I found a cave in a hill where the mountain, coming from the west, bends to the southeast, where there I dwelt, giving myself up to meditation. No, I gave myself up to waiting, for that every breath was a prayer for revelation. Believing in God, invisible yet supreme, I also believed it possible so to yearn for him with all my soul that he would take compassion and give me answer. And he did, exclaimed the Hindu, lifting his hands from the silken cloth upon his lap. Hear me, brethren, said the Greek, calming himself with an effort. The door of my hermitage looks over an arm of the sea, over the Thermaic Gulf. One day I saw a man flung overboard from a ship sailing by. He swam ashore. I received and took care of him. He was a Jew, learned in the history and laws of his people, and from him I came to know that the God of my prayers did indeed exist, and had been for ages their lawmaker, ruler, and king. What was that but the revelation I dreamed of? My faith had not been fruitless. God answered me, as he does all who cry to him with such faith, said the Hindu. But alas, the Egyptian added, How few are there wise enough to know when he answers them? That was not all, the Greek continued. The man so sent to me told me more. He said the prophets who in the ages which followed the first revelation walked and talked with God declared he would come again. He gave me the names of the prophets and from the sacred books quoted their very language. He told me further that the second coming was at hand, was looked for momentarily in Jerusalem. The Greek paused, and the brightness of his countenance faded. It is true, he said after a little, it is true that the man told me that as God and the revelation of which he spoke had been for the Jews alone, so it would be again. He that was to come would be king of the Jews. Had he nothing for the rest of the world? I asked. No, was the answer, given in proud voice. No, we are his chosen people. The answer did not crush my hope. Why should such a God limit his love and benefactions to one land, and, as it were, to one family? I set my heart upon knowing. At last I broke through the man's pride and found that his fathers had been merely chosen servants to keep the truth alive, that the world might at last know it and be saved. When the Jew was gone and I was alone again, I chastened my soul with a new prayer, that I might be permitted to see the King when he was come and worship him. One night I sat by the door of my cave, trying to get nearer the mysteries of my existence, knowing which is to know God suddenly on the sea below me, or rather in the darkness that covered my face. I saw I saw a star begin to burn. Slowly it arose and drew nigh, and stood over the hill and above my door, so that its light shone full upon me. I fell down, and in my dream I heard a voice say, O Gaspar, thy faith hath conquered. Blessed art thou. With two others, come from the uttermost parts of the earth, thou shalt see him that is promised, and be a witness for him, and the occasion of testimony in his behalf. In the morning arise and go meet them, and keep trust in the Spirit that shall guide thee. And in the morning I awoke with the Spirit as a light within me, surpassing that of the sun. I put off my hermit's garb and dressed myself as of old. From a hiding place I took the treasure which I had brought from the city. A ship went sailing past. I hailed it and was taken aboard and landed at Antioch. There I bought the camel and his furniture. Through the gardens and orchards that enamel the banks of the Orontes, I ordered to Emasca, Damascus, Bostra, and Philadelphia, thence hither. And so, O brethren, you have my story. Let me now listen to you. And as I said before, that is where I'm going to stop it. Chapter 4 is the speech of the Hindu. And chapter 5 is the Egyptian story. So we will stop it there. I don't have a bookmark with me, but I will get one. And like I said, this is one of my favorite books. I really think that you're going to like it once we get into it. It is a little slow getting started, but don't let that stop you from enjoying it. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for Heavy D Storytelling. I do see one person aboard. I'm assuming that Granny Bear is going to watch it later. I hope that Rebecca gets to watch it later. And I will see you again tomorrow, where we start with the speech of the Hindu, the Egyptian, or the Indian, and then the Egyptian, and then see what else lies behind or beyond those two stories. So God bless you. Have a good night, and thank you for tuning in. Good night. Bye.